I was 8 years old the night the fire took my siblings, or at least, that's what the world was told. December 24th, 1945. The house was buzzing with warmth, laughter, and the smell of roasted chestnuts. Christmas Eve in Fayetteville, West Virginia was always special in our home. My father, George Sodder, a proud Italian immigrant and outspoken man, had worked hard to build us a life in this quiet, cold town. My mother Jenny was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cleaned up after dinner. My brothers Maurice, Louis, and sisters Martha, Jenny Jr., and Betty were still playing with the wrapping paper and arguing over who got to hang the last ornament. At some point that night, we all drifted off to bed. Except for the 5 youngest. Mum let them stay up a little longer to play, a small reward for being good all week. The fire started around 1 a.m. I remember the sound before the smell, the crack of glass, the whoosh of air being sucked from the hallway. My older brother John yanked me out of bed and dragged me down the stairs. Smoke filled the air, choking and hot. Flames were already climbing the walls of the staircase. The heat was unbearable. We screamed for the others, Maurice, Martha, Betty, Louis, Jenny, but their voices didn't answer. My parents got out with 4 of us kids. We stood barefoot in the snow, staring at the house as it became an inferno. My father tried to go back in. He broke a window and burned his hands. He ran to grab the ladder he always kept on the side of the house. It was gone. Gone. He tried to start his truck to drive up the hill for help. Both his trucks, fine hours earlier, wouldn't start. We watched our home burn to the ground. The fire department didn't arrive until daylight. By then, there was almost nothing left but ash and twisted beams. But something didn't make sense. No bones, no bodies. 5 children had supposedly died in that fire, but after hours of sifting through the ashes, the fire chief found nothing. Not a single tooth, not one bone fragment. They said the fire was hot enough to vaporize them. But my mother didn't buy it. She called the crematorium. Human bones don't just vanish. Even in cremation, teeth and bone fragments always remain. And then came the calls. A woman from Charleston claimed she saw 4 of the children in the back of a car that night. A hotel maid said she saw them weeks later. 2 boys and 2 girls with oddly silent eyes. And my mother? She swore someone called late that night. A woman's voice, laughing softly, asking for a name no one in our house recognized. Before, the line went dead. For the rest of his life, my father searched. He never believed they died in that fire. He believed they were taken, and I've never stopped wondering. Because I remember something strange. Just before the fire broke out, I woke up to the sound of something hitting the roof, like a thud, then a roll, then silence. A week later, someone found a strange blackened object in the yard. It looked like a piece of metal, twisted and scorched. My father said it resembled a napalm pineapple bomb he'd seen in the war. But why would anyone throw that on our roof? Who would want to destroy our family? Who would want to take my siblings? The newspapers printed our story. They called it tragedy, accident, misfortune. But they were wrong, because the real story was only just beginning. A week after the fire, we received the first letter. No return address. Just a single sheet of yellowed paper, written in shaky cursive. They didn't die. You are being watched. Stop digging. My father stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and placed it in a cigar box beneath his bed. He didn't tell the police. He didn't trust them anymore. After the fire chief, F.J. Morris, had acted strange. He claimed he'd found a small heart in the ashes and buried it in a dynamite box at the scene without telling anyone. When my father demanded it be dug up weeks later, they found a slab of beef liver untouched by flame. Morris said he planted it to give my mother closure. Closure? It felt like mockery. Then came the stranger. He appeared at our house in the spring of 1946, middle-aged, dark suit, black fedora pulled low, claimed he was a life insurance salesman, but after my father politely declined, the man grew cold. "You're going to pay," he muttered. "That fire was your punishment for the things you said about Mussolini." Then he got into his car and drove away. My parents stood frozen in the doorway. You see, my father had many enemies. He was fiercely anti-fascist and wasn't quiet about it. In our small Italian community, some supported Mussolini, others despised him. But only my father put up a billboard in our front yard condemning him. That billboard stood for years until the fire burned it down. We were convinced someone set the fire, but the authorities refused to investigate, so we did it ourselves. My father scraped together what little money we had and hired private detectives. Some vanished after a few weeks. One wrote a single line before quitting. "They are too powerful, let it go." In 1952, my parents built a new billboard along Route 16, this one taller, bolder, screaming to the world, 5 children missing. They didn't die in the fire. $10,000 reward for information. The photo of the 5 smiling children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, haunted every passing driver. And that's when the letters started again. One claimed to be from a woman who raised the children in Italy. Another included a rough drawing of a house with bars on the windows and 5 stick figures inside. But the strangest came in 1967. It was postmarked Central City, Kentucky. No return address. Inside was a photo of a young man in his 20s, dark hair, olive skin. On the back was scribbled, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil Boys, A90132 or 35. My mother cried for hours. My father paced the kitchen all night, staring at that photo. It looked just like Louis. Same eyes, same crooked grin. We sent a detective to Kentucky. He disappeared without a trace. Years passed. My parents never gave up. They left the light on every night in case the children returned. They kept their mail in neat stacks, thousands of pages, each one examined, reread, decoded. And I started dreaming about the thud on the roof again. Except this time, I saw a shadow standing in the yard, a tall figure in a coat, tossing something upward. A faint glow, a small arc through the night sky. Then fire. Was it just a dream, or was it a memory clawing its way back? In the years that followed, we tried to move on, but the silence never let us. Every creak in the hallway, every letter with no return address, every unfamiliar car idling too long near the house. They all whispered the same thing. They're still out there. My parents aged quickly. Grief turned my mother's hair white within a year. But she still washed the 5 untouched, dinner plates every night. She never packed away their clothes. She kept them folded in the drawers, just in case. In 1955, we got another tip. A woman from Charleston, West Virginia, claimed she had seen Martha and Betty at a Catholic orphanage. My father drove there that same week. He asked for access, even offered money, but the sisters refused. "Your children are not here," one of them said flatly. "You must let God handle it now." But my father was stubborn. He waited outside for hours, watching the windows, looking for a familiar face. He swore he saw a girl, maybe 14, watching him from the second-floor dorm. She had Betty's dark curls. When she saw him, she stepped back behind the curtain and never reappeared. When he asked again the next day, the nuns had already transferred some of the girls to another facility. No forwarding address, no names. That's when we realized the truth. Whoever took them didn't just want them gone, they wanted us confused, constantly questioning, forever searching. In 1968, a new clue arrived. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was a man. He appeared in Fayetteville, walking along Route 16 near the old property. Middle-aged, grey around the temples, thick scar down the side of his face. He stood in front of the billboard for nearly 30 minutes, unmoving. A neighbor
asked him if he needed help. "I grew up in this town," he replied.
Used to live in that house before it burned. She asked for his name, but he just smiled and walked off. By the time she told us, he was gone. No one had seen where he went. My father hired another detective. This one traced a lead to St. Louis, Missouri, where an Italian immigrant family had taken in 2 boys rescued from a train station in 1946. The family refused to speak, claimed it was in God's hands. But the strangest thing, one of the boys had a large burn on his upper thigh, just like Maurice had after an accident with boiling water as a toddler. We begged for a DNA test. They refused. The government said they couldn't intervene. By 1975, the police had stopped returning our calls. Even the local paper stopped publishing updates, said it was cruel to keep reopening the wound. But the wound never closed, and then came the call. It was a stormy evening. In late October, my parents were watching the news when the phone rang. My mother answered. "Mom," the voice said. She froze. "Mom, it's me. I don't have long." She asked who it was, but the voice broke into static. "Please." "It's Lewis. They won't let..." The line went dead. We traced the call to a motel in Tulsa, Oklahoma. When authorities arrived, the room was empty. Bed neatly made, phone ripped from the wall. A single cigarette still burning in the ashtray. We never got another call, but I know what I heard. My mother swore it was him. The tone, the rhythm, the tiny stutter on the L when he said his name. It matched every home video we'd ever watched. Someone
had allowed him to call, and someone had stopped it.
Now, every October, I get that same uneasy feeling, like eyes watching from the trees, like footsteps just behind me, as if Louis is still trying to reach out, and someone is still keeping him silent. It was 1981 when we found the photograph. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. My mother was sorting the mail when she saw it, slipped between a bank notice and a coupon flyer. Inside was a single photo. A man in his 30s standing in front of a low, stucco building with a faded green awning. His eyes were sharp, haunted. He wore a suit 2 sizes too big, and a small gold ring glinted on his right hand. Lewis's ring. The note on the back read only, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Lil boys. A90132 or 35. We stared at that message for hours. My father refused to put the photo down. He studied every crease of the man's face, comparing it to old childhood portraits. The shape of the jaw, the eyes, the ears. "It's him," he said finally. "He's alive." I wanted to believe him. The FBI refused to open a new investigation. They called it a hoax. Grief creates patterns, the agent told us. Sometimes people see what they want to see, but we weren't done searching. That year, my older brother, John, traveled to Houston, then down to a tiny border town in New Mexico. He followed a rumor from a retired private eye, one who claimed a former mob courier had mentioned 2 missing Italian boys in a drunk confession. John found the building from the photograph. It was a shuttered barbershop now, with yellowed windows and dead flies on the sill. A woman across the street said it had been closed since '72, but she remembered the man. Kept to himself, she said. Real polite. Spoke like he wasn't from around here. One day he was just gone. She mentioned one strange detail. He was always looking over his shoulder, always asking about bus schedules, always changing his route home, like someone was chasing him. When John asked her if he ever gave a name, she nodded slowly. He said,
"His name was Louis," she whispered. "But he made me promise never to tell." Back in Fayetteville, my father made a decision. He rebuilt the billboard. The original one had fallen to rot and wind, but this new one was bigger, bolder, 20
feet tall, with floodlights that stayed on all night. On it were the faces of all 5 missing children, age progressed as best we could, and beneath them, stolen, not lost. We will never stop looking. That week, a black car drove by our house. No plates, tinted windows. It circled 3 times. My father stood in the yard, shotgun in hand, until it finally sped away. The next morning, someone left a dead dog on our porch. No note, no prints, just the same cigarette brand we'd found in that Oklahoma motel ashtray crushed beneath the body. I started to have dreams after that. Not dreams, memories maybe, of a tall man with a southern drawl, of a dark basement, of whispered
orders. I'd wake up shaking, the scent of smoke and salt water in my nose. Were they memories from before the fire? Or something my mind had created, twisting decades of pain into phantoms?
One night I visited the ruins. The house was long gone, replaced by weeds and vines and broken stones. But I walked the old path, the place where my siblings' bedroom had been. I lit a single match and stared into the black. Then I saw it, carved deep into the old oak next to the rubble. Alive, forgive me. The bark was new, maybe 2 years old, fresh enough to bleed sap. I took a photo and showed my mother. She cried for hours. We weren't chasing ghosts anymore. Someone out there
wanted us to stop.
But someone else, maybe Louis, maybe one of the others, was still trying to be found. We were closer than ever, and someone was getting nervous. It was a stormy night in early 1985 when the final clue came. A letter, no envelope, just a folded sheet of parchment taped to the front door. It was soaked, but the ink hadn't run. Whoever wrote it had planned for the weather. It said, "Stop digging. Some graves are meant to stay hidden. Last warning." No signature, no return address, just the faint trace of cigar smoke clinging to the page. My father read it and didn't say a word. He just walked to the shed, got his crowbar, and pried up the last section of our basement floor, the one part we'd never touched since the fire. The concrete there had always been strangely newer, poured after the flames were gone. The fire chief had dismissed it as post-tragedy repairs, but my father never trusted that explanation. Beneath the slab, we found bones. Human bones, small ones. At first, we thought our worst fears had come true, that our siblings had never been taken, just buried in secret beneath our feet. But the coroner's report changed everything. The bones weren't all from the same person, and they didn't match the dental records of any of the 5 missing Sodder children. Some were older than the fire, some were newer. Someone had been using our house as a grave long before, and possibly long after, December 24th, 1945. We turned everything over to the authorities. The FBI took control, launched a new investigation, even brought in forensic artists. But 3 months in, the report was sealed. No cause of death, no names, no answers. When my father demanded updates, a federal agent visited us late at night. He was alone, wore a grey suit and no badge. He said only, "You're looking at something much bigger than a fire. For your family's safety, let it go." Then he left, and we never saw him again. Weeks later, we received one last letter. It was postmarked from Palermo, Sicily. Inside was another photograph, an elderly woman standing next to a young man who looked almost like Louis. They were in front
Of a vineyard.
The woman's eyes were wide with fear, as if the camera wasn't supposed to see her. On the back, one line: "The circle ends when the fire is forgotten." My father passed away that winter. My mother followed 2 years later. We never found.
Louis or Jenny or Martha or Maurice or Betty. But I'm still looking. The billboard still stands. And sometimes when I visit late at night, I find small things left behind. A child's shoe, a toy soldier, a matchbox with a gold ring inside. They
Never come with notes. Just silent reminders that someone out there knows the truth. Some say it was the mafia. Others say it was a government program gone wrong, children taken for testing or rehomed through underground networks. A few even believe something supernatural happened that night in 1945. But I know this: 5 children vanished. No bodies were ever found, and someone, somewhere, never wanted them to be found again. The fire never burned hot enough to erase the truth, just enough to silence it.